What up, dudes? Robby. As I sit on this leather chair, which makes lots of squeaky noises, in a hotel room in St. Louis, I wanted to take this opportunity of time to talk about a subject that I've done a lot of stuff on, obviously surrounding like the mental game of baseball. Just kind of give some more talking points, just some more tips when it comes to like the yips, the throwing yips, not knowing where the ball's going, all these things. You never know when you're one phrase or one cue or one tip away from kind of just having things click and then moving on. So I had a really good conversation the other day with a guy on our team. So for those of you guys who don't know, I'm in independent baseball and I'm a player coach. So I'm serving as the pitching coach and a starting pitcher. Tough to balance, but love what I'm doing right now. So I had a really good conversation with one of my pitchers about this, who was very similar to me, who had, struggled mechanically, struggled with a lot of different input throughout the course of his career, with just a burning passion, a burning desire to improve. That kind of, we talk about how like my perfectionism influences my mental struggles sometimes, because like, especially in the game of baseball, when you want something so bad, care so much, and you love the thing so much that it's really hard mentally to kind of like let go, in a sense, right? So we were having this really good conversation after one of his outings, kind of just getting familiar with each other. He's new to the team. An attempt to kind of reiterate some of the things that was mentioned. I think when we struggle with the mental game, when we struggle with the mental side in between the ears, right? So when we're somebody that has all the physical talent in the world, I talk about this a lot, how like, honestly, from the physical standpoint, so physically the difference between, I'm even going to say this and then everyone's going to freak out, physically the difference, guys in the big leagues to guys in this league that I'm currently playing in, independent baseball, there's not a huge gap. Like, yeah, you have your outliers, like you have your Judge, Stanton's, some outliers in the big leagues that when they freaking were born, they were just like, you're going to be a physical specimen. Like, go ahead, right? Like, yes. But the average, like the lump sum of individuals in the big leagues, like physically, there's not much of a physical difference. So where does that leave us? Right here. For me, I think like the biggest thing that separates like the big leaguers from the guys that play at a lower level is what they do mentally to prepare themselves for their ability to be consistent, right? It's like trusting this sense of security in themselves and security in their process that allows them to just stay the course, right? Whereas you play with a lot of guys, in indie ball that like you watch, say they're BP and they're just like, this guy's freaking unreal. Like, what the heck's he doing here? Or even like pitchers, you watch their bullpens and the things that they can do in their bullpens and you're just puzzled, right? And then things change in the game. So when we were having this conversation, I was kind of just sitting there talking because I had just caught him that day, like in the bullpen before the game. We were working on some of his stuff, and it was lights out, right? And so he gets into the game and kind of things, go. I mean, he threw well, like scoreless inning. There were some cues that were mentioned pertaining to like a lefty batter that he was hesitant because he didn't want to hit him and all these kind of things. So what I wanted to bring up to him, the brain's job is to constantly monitor threat. So what it does is it takes past experiences, right? Like in past trauma, and it tries to then predict future threats while in the present moment. I know that's kind of very nerdy and maybe doesn't make sense to you. The only way that we can be mentally present is if we are only reliant upon breath and action and just physical movement, right? Like if we don't do that, like our brain is going to be here or it's going to be here, right? So it's either going to be dwelling in the past, which is uncontrollable, or it's going to be attempting to predict future, which is uncontrollable. The only thing that's controllable is the middle ground, which is the present moment. How does this pertain to baseball? We have a beautiful game that is built around failure, right? So we fail more times than we succeed, depending on who you are. But I know for me, I've failed more times than I have succeeded. Now, we all know that failure is a great teaching tool, right? And you can learn a lot from it and you can grow from that. But failure is still failure, and we are still humans and we are still flawed. So our brain goes, all right, we're failing. This sucks, right? These emotions that are arising right now suck. I don't want to experience that. So then when I'm going to be potentially in that situation again, I'm going to do whatever it takes to like be as hands-on as possible and avoid that, or just avoid the frickin' scene altogether. So that can pertain to certain pitch sequencing to a specific batter, and that could then prevent you from being your best physical version of yourself, whether it be in the box, in the field, on the mound. Let's go deeper into that. If you're on the mound, you throw a slider, say like 0-2, and you hang it, and you have this feeling physically of that pitch coming off your fingertips. And those sliders you hang, you go, oh, frick, that's not good. And then you just see the whole thing, even though it's happening in like less than a second, you see the whole thing just tater salad. Always imprinted into here. That's never gonna leave us. So then, when it comes time to then throw your next slider, you then consciously and actively try to avoid that. But what happens within being hands-on, I guess I would say, like mentally, is you restrict yourself physically. When you restrict yourself physically, that's when things don't flow, right? That's when tempo and timing is all jacked up. I talk about flow state a lot. Flow state is a state of mind in which you're breathing and you're just going, and there's no consciousness. There's no active thought process. I'm not saying thought process is bad in general, but it's the state in which you are your best physical version, your best physical self, and that's the zone, right? That's why I loved playing basketball growing up, was because like things were happening, right? And there was no time to think. It was just react. That's why I love time-sensitive task orientation stuff, because there is no time for thought. Piggybacking off that time for thought thing, baseball is very not time-sensitive, right? So there's always opportunity to think. So that's going to happen. But can we, and this is another subject that I brought up to the individual I was describing earlier, can we target our thought? If we're a thinker, right? So if the stimulus of thinking throughout our entire day is so high, meaning it's hard to turn this off unless you sleep like a koala bear, right? Like this is going to be on. So your brain's not going to just automatically just turn off in the heat of the moment, right? It's going to want to turn on. Two things there. One, be intentional and diligent with a practice, like putting into place a practice in which you can find a flow, like you can find breathing. I told the guy, like, have a pen, have a paper, go 10, 15 minutes, sit down, meditation, and you're just breathing in, out. I do box breathing, like 4-second inhale, 4-second hold, 4-second exhale, 4 seconds hold. So have a pen, have a paper, and log your sessions. So if I'm going to go 10 minutes, I'm going to be so focused on my breath, just breath, and then boom, oh, I thought of Starbucks. Boom, that's a dash. Oh, boom, I thought of a slider. Boom, that's a dash. And then as the course of time proceeds, you see that you get better with that. It's just like anything, right? Like you have to put it into practice to be good at it. It's skill acquisition. We can't just assume that we're going to be good at it in the heat of the moment when all eyes are on, right? Talk about that a lot in some of the other videos I've done. Second thing is target thought, right? So if you're a thinker, if you're like me, target thoughts and try to target positivity. Target more of a positive mental influence, which to me brings about a more of a physical freedom. Now, that's not to say you have to target positive. Like I know plenty of guys that like will tell themselves they suck and then they want to prove them wrong, right? Like they want to prove themselves wrong. Like you won't do this, and then you're like, let's do it, and they freaking go, and it's great. You got to identify yourself first, right? What type of guy are you? I'm a type of guy that needs freedom and almost needs less thought. But if I do think, it needs to be targeted towards something that's going to promote freedom, which could be, I'm targeting thought process into the way that I sequence guys, who's on deck, what's his last 10 games look like, how did he hit the day before, maybe if I faced him a couple months ago, like what did I sequence him with, just very things like that. Like there's so much information in the game that you can get a lot of information to potentially think about that then takes your mind away from what we were mentioning earlier with past failures that can then hinder us in the present moment, right? So target thought process is just a way to avoid the negative thoughts that could potentially arise from past failures. Last thing is security, a sense of security. I believe like a lot of the mental game stuff in baseball is kind of based upon our own personal insecurities, right? So for me, I'm very vocal about this because I have no shame in this. For me, like when I've gone through my biggest struggles, like even last night I pitched and I gave up 3 homers and I was very like embarrassed. It's embarrassing. Why is it embarrassing? Like everyone knows, like everyone that puts a jersey on knows how hard the game is and knows it's built upon failure, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's embarrassing for me personally because of all the stuff that I do to put myself in a position to succeed. It's embarrassing because I do above and beyond. I wake up early, I go to bed early, I get all the sleep that I need, I eat the right things, I prepare the right way, I'm training, I'm doing all these things just to go out there and fail. And it's like, good job, buddy. It's embarrassing, right? So there's no doubt about it. But at the end of the day, I think I've done a good job of like overcoming a lot of those personal insecurities because of the way that I used to be with how much I put emphasis on what other people were viewing me as. I took more importance that people were viewing me a certain way than the way that I was viewing myself. I think like the foundation of this, like the underlying issue is that, I know this is going to sound geeky, but if you're okay and you're content with who you are as a person, as a human being, not as an athlete, but if you're content and you love yourself, I know, nerdy, everything else is going to fall into place, right? I think it's when we have somewhat of like insecurities about ourselves and we're consciously, I would say more actively trying to please other people instead of just please ourselves, then that's when we get into the fine line of like, all right, we're trying to control things that are beyond our control, right? We can't control other people's emotions, right? That's theirs to control. It's not ours. We can do whatever we can to like find a way to be completely content, happy, joyful, loving to ourselves. Like we can control that. Like I want to be able to look in the mirror and be like, that a baby. You're doing good, kid. Keep going. Nice job. But like when it comes to other people, right? Like most specifically, I would say like the biggest root cause is like when we try to please our manager, our pitching coach, people of like higher power, high authority that has authority to make decisions about us. Like we try to please them and then we lose sight of like, who are we? What's our foundation? And that's how we then grow. I know that's a lot, and I know we kind of like jump from bridge to bridge and whatever, but hopefully there was just some pieces in there that kind of shed some light on this. I would say this was more of a video on you know, up here, because like there's plenty of stuff that I've done on like throwing yips or the mental game of baseball that is more of a physical practice that you can put in, right? So you can check all that stuff out, therobbyrowshow.com/yips. And I would encourage you to check out my YouTube playlist on the mental game of baseball. I also have a whole segment on my website, therobbyrowshow.com, on mental game. So all that stuff is in there. There's plenty of videos on this stuff. But I just wanted to shed some light on that. Maybe you can take something from it. Who knows? I just really enjoyed that conversation the other day, and I wish I could remember exactly like what was said, because I think it was very helpful, and who knows, maybe this was too. But much love, guys. As always, reach out, therobbyrowshow.com/ask with anything that you're personally struggling with, dealing with. I would just love to help. That's the foundation of everything that I do online. All right, guys, God bless. I'm going to go to work now.